Welcome to Tread Talk from Treadmill TV. In our first episode, we're going to be talking to Coach Jack Hazen from Malone College in Canton, Ohio. Coach has been at Malone College since 1967. In that time, he has had a 43-year streak of making it to the national meet with a team. In 1972, he won his first college national championship in cross country with the men's team and has won 3 more times since then. In 1999, the women won the national championship, and Coach has become the winningest coach in NAIA college cross-country history. He has coached 329 individual All-Americans, and over 100 of his athletes have gone on to become coaches themselves. So today we get to talk to Coach as a legend, but also as an individual. We get to know him as a person and see that other side when athletes see them not just as a coach, but also as a friend. You didn't start as a cross-country coach, did you? You started with Woody Hayes, didn't you?
I actually started with, it all went back to my high school career. I participated in football and really liked that and thought I wanted to be a football coach. Kind of decided early that was my goal. My mother made me go to a school, Asbury College, that didn't have a football team.
Yeah.
So I was kind of, behind in that. I had to go there. That's where she went. She wanted me to be a minister, and she was paying for it. So back in those days, there was no financial aid available. And so I reluctantly went to Asbury College, and after graduating, came home. I majored disappointed her and didn't major in theology. I majored in physical education and anatomy.
Yeah.
And came home in 1962 and thought I would find a job coaching and teaching here in Stark County. That's where I was originally from. And that didn't pan out, so I told my mother I wanted to go to Ohio State and get my master's degree. And she said, I'm running out of money, but I have enough for 1 quarter. Why don't you apply for a grad assistantship? I did, but it was too late. And so I went to the first quarter at Ohio State thinking that was probably going to be one and done until I could get a job and raise some more money. But during the first week of classes, the director of the department came to me and said, we had a grad assistant that got ill and went home, and would you be interested in a graduate assistantship? And I said, sure. So that involved teaching and working in the exercise physiology lab. Woody Hayes had a interest in playing handball, and the handball courts were right beside our physiology lab. So he would come over occasionally, actually about once or twice a week, and say, anybody want to play handball? Because, he came over by himself, and I would always volunteer.
Huh.
And so I got to know him a little bit and told him my plight, that I really didn't have a background in collegiate football and wanted to be a high school football coach. And what would he suggest I do? He actually got me my first job at Mount Vernon High School under who he thought was one of the best high school coaches in Ohio, a guy by the name of Chuck Stobart. And so I went there my first year. This would have been in the fall of 1963, and coached football. And when the season ended, we were very successful. By the way, it was a high-powered. We beat Upper Arlington and some of the state powers at that time.
Yeah, that's still a state power.
Yeah, and I think we were ranked second in the state. Anyway, the principal, after football season, said, hey, we don't have a track coach for next year. Would you be interested? And I said, I don't know anything about track. And he said, well, it pays this much. And I was single. And so I said, sure, why not?
Yeah.
So I started coaching track. And I kind of really started liking the relationship I had with that sport, with the athletes. It was different than football. Football, you were expected to be kind of a tough guy and yell and, demand, excellence. In track and field, it was more working with the athletes and getting to know them a little better. And we had some really good distance runners. And it was the first year that the Ohio High School Athletic Association allowed men to run 2 miles on the track, and we had 3 guys that were pretty decent in the 2 mile. So my second year of football, I coached football and started coaching track, and the board suggested that we might think about starting a cross country team, which we did the third year, and I had a really good team. One of my athletes, actually a shot putter, when he graduated my third year, came to Malone and came home in the summer for summer vacation. He said, "Coach, our college coach just retired. You ought to apply at Malone." He knew that I was from the area, and I did. And 53 years later, here I am.
Yeah.
I was actually hired at Malone as the soccer coach. The dean at the time that was hiring didn't care so much about how good we were as coaches. He wanted a professor that could teach in the science area, kinesiology and anatomy, and he definitely wanted someone from a Christian background, and my Asbury background landed me the job at Malone, I think. And I was hired as soccer coach. Got here and got to know some of the other coaches, and the baseball coach said, "Hey, they want me to coach cross country. I don't know anything about cross country." And I said, "Well, they want me to coach soccer, and I don't know anything about soccer." He says, "Well, you know, track, you want to switch?" I said, "Oh, sure, thank you." So that really fell into place, and so I didn't have to coach soccer, and I coached cross country the first year. We didn't win a meet. I had one really good runner. He was from Canton McKinley. But we went on then and pretty quickly got a pretty good team together. I'd have a team one year, and then I'd recruit, and then the next year I'd have almost a totally different team because those guys weren't good enough to to be in the top 7.
Yeah.
And that went on for a couple of years, and actually in 1972 we won our first national championship, and that was pretty awesome. And I thought, wow, this is pretty neat. You can do this all the time. And we didn't do it again for another 30 years or so.
Well, one of the things that happened with the 1972 team were those some of the guys that you had coached in high school that came to be in college with you as a coach?
No, some of them came the first couple years, more track than cross country. I had one track guy that was an outstanding sprinter, hurdler, long jumper, and he came to Malone his freshman year and set, I think, 10 school records.
Wow.
But the guys that I had in 72 were none of them came from Mount Vernon. They were all ones that I had recruited. Some of them locally here, right in Stark County. Our first All-American actually was from New Jersey, Bill Scholl. And in my old age here as a coach, I've been discovering that I needed to. I spent all my time coaching new kids and recruiting, and didn't nurture my alumni. So we've reached out, and a couple of the guys have helped me get alumni together, and we have weekly calls now. Tomorrow we have a Google Hangout with 22 of those athletes that were back in the 72 era, and most of the national championship guys were on it, and it's fun finding. I just talked to one last week, a week and a half ago, that I had not talked to for 50 years.
Wow.
And we just located him, and now he's on the call. So that's been real interesting.
Well, that's the fun thing. I don't know about most other teams, but with cross country, you spend so much time shoulder to shoulder with each other that even if you haven't seen each other in a long time, it seems like you just pick up right where you left off a lot of times.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And with the virtual ability to see faces and talk, it's really been neat.
Yeah. Well, you've had a big career. You were 42-year consecutive conference cross-country winner. Is that right?
Yeah, it's safer to say that we qualified for the national championship 42 years in a row. Some of the time the conference changed. At first, it was the district champion that went, and then it became the conference champion. So, whatever the championship meet was that determined that we go to the nationals, we did it 43, I think, straight
43
years.
Have you ever looked that up as far as college records? Is that one of the longest running records in college, or is nobody looked that up?
Nobody's looked it up. I suggested it to our sports information guy one time, and he, I'm not sure how you do that, but
it'd be a lot of digging.
Yeah, I guess I would say that we have the record, and then that way somebody will say, no.
As soon as you claim it, somebody else tries to claim it back.
Right.
So some of the stories from coaching, I mean, coaching is, Lauren and I coached for 8 years afterward because we're one of the, 400, 500 athletes that you coached that went on to become coaches afterward.
Yeah.
And most of the kids that when we see them again, they never talk about workouts. They never talk about meets, even if they were, state qualifying athletes. They always talk about the most embarrassing things that we as coaches did when we were with them, whether we ran into somebody with our bike or whether we got lost when we were driving the bus. You want to tell the story about when you got arrested in the middle of practice?
Well, let me first of all say that is very true. And in fact, in these virtual times where we just lost our track season and our athletes who were seniors, some of them are not going to try to compete again.
Yeah.
We're doing, our sports information department is doing features on them. And most of them, when asked the question, what do you remember most about being on a team? It's exactly that.
Yeah.
Right now, it's we've been going up to Mammoth Lakes, California, for altitude training in the last number of years, and that by far is the most often mentioned thing. That experience of being in Mammoth together in the mountains up at altitude with Dina Castor and Olympic athletes and Olympic coaches, and you're right on target. That's what they remember. In our most recent virtual hangouts with those 22 alumni from the 70s, they've been talking, and the same thing is true. They talk about experiences and things they did together, much about winning the national championships, but things that happened along the way.
Right.
And we've, besides the 70 guys, we've had some guys a little later. I don't know if you know Al McCowan. He's a lawyer. He ran for me. He and there were three guys here in the local area that I recruited at the same time, the same year. And they all hated each other because they were competing against each other.
Yeah.
And it was Jerry Marshall, Kevin Case, and Al, and each one of them would say, "Well, Coach, I think I would come to Malone if Jerry wasn't coming."
Yeah.
And I go, "Oh, I don't think he's coming." They all three ended up coming to Malone, and they ended up all being in each other's weddings and becoming best friends.
Wow.
And I tell you that to lead into on the last Google Hangout, the guys were. Some of them were saying really gracious things about me, and Al texted back to the whole group and said, "I want to interrupt all this praise for Hazen and what a great guy he is, because here's his police record.
Yeah,
disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, and he had the actual document because he's a lawyer now, and he was my lawyer. And
Wow.
I promptly text back and said, yeah, I'd probably still be in jail if I didn't have you as a lawyer or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, your question was, yeah, did you want me to
Yeah.
explain that a little more?
What's the story behind that?
Well, the story was that we had to practice down in Hall of Fame, the stadium park down by the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And it was our regular workout site, and we had a course marked out. And the park department had put up a construction fence because they were doing some construction. Well, it was only like about 10 feet, short of. We started behind it, and I called the park director and I said, "Would you mind if we just laid that fence down? It was like a snow fence
Yeah.
to do our workout once a week." And he said, "Yeah, no, coach, I let you do it. We're going to have to let everybody do it." And I said, I understand. So I marked off I just extended it a little bit, no problem. And so we went down for our first workout, and the fence was laid down. It wasn't across there. So I go, oh, we'll just use our normal course. About halfway through the workout, a police cruiser came by on the other side of the park drive there, and he got us on his loudspeaker, and he said, "You must vacate the area immediately." And they were in the middle of a repeat, an 800-meter repeat or 700-meter. And so I put up my hand and I said, "Could you wait just a minute?" And so he got out of his cruiser and came down, and he was a very tough, mean guy. And he says, "You need to get out of here. Tell them to stop running right now." And I go, "Well, they're clear over there. Can they finish?" He says, "No, everybody has to leave right now." And I said, "Well, we can't do that." And so he grabbed me and threw me in the back seat of his police car. And the athletes were finishing, and they didn't know what to do. And my assistant coach, Julie Ferguson, she was looking at me, and I'm in the police car. And the policeman said, "Roll down your window and tell them all to leave the area." And so I rolled down the window and I said, "You guys keep on running." And he said, "That's it. You smart college professor think you're going to get away with, you think you can just do anything you want to do." And so he hauled me down to jail and booked me.
Wow.
And he called before he did that, he called the park director and he says, "Did you give this guy permission to lay down the fence?" And he said, "No." And he said, "See, you're lying," and he thought I had put the fence down. Anyway, I was booked into jail and had to get my daughter to bail me out. And
Wow.
my police record still says that I didn't show up for court, but the mayor got involved and said, "Coach, don't even. We're going to take this off your record, but you can still Google it and find it."
20 years later, it's still not off
Yeah,
the record.
yeah. So Al's message to the athletes is, don't believe all this stuff about how good he is. He's got a police record.
Well, that's the funny thing, too, about coaching, because one of the reasons I became a coach is because my high school coach was a great guy, a great example. College coach, which is you, was a great guy, great example. And then in addition to coaching and teaching, I also got my bus driver's license in order to drive the team, because there was one night in particular in the middle of Georgia. So we're on this long trip, and you were driving between Canton and Georgia. I forget what the city was. I think it was Rome. And pitch black, no street lights, no other cars around. And I learned what Ghost Driver was that night, because you shut off the own bus headlights. All the lights from the inside of the bus got shut off, and you started swerving left and right, jerking everybody around. And I thought that'd be a great way to get some athletes' attention, is to do some Ghost Rider moves, just like Coach Hazen down in the middle of a bus in Georgia.
So you did that?
I was never driving at night, but I did jerk the bus around a few times just to get some people to wake up before we got to the meet.
Well, I don't know if you were ever with us the best bus driving prank is when you've seen on the freeway a big wrecker pulling a cab of a semi backwards. You know how they hook onto the back of a semi.
Oh yeah.
And so we're on some trips when we're traveling a long distance and everybody's asleep. I'll come up behind that reverse truck being pulled.
Yeah.
And I'll slam on the brakes and start screaming, and everybody thinks that they look up and see that truck coming at them, and that's the best one I think that we've ever done.
That's the kind of things that they don't usually repeat at an awards banquet,
right?
Because a lot of people know you as the coach, and then in addition to being a coach, you're also a published author, and so they see your record of being a winning coach, being an author, being a public speaker, being all these other things, but they don't get the little details of the bus driving and the coaching and the jokes before and after practice and all those other things. So it's been
the rest of the story.
Yeah, the Paul Harvey moments. So in addition to being a coach, though, you're also a runner yourself. And it's not always been easy for you because you made a decision to keep your leg at a point when a lot of doctors were advising you that you might need to amputate your leg. Do you want to tell that story or talk about that experience?
Yeah, I got a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, and it was misdiagnosed because my doctor was a Malone graduate. He was a medical doctor and my personal physician. And I actually went into him I said, I have some swelling in my calf and it's kind of hurts. And he said, this was in the afternoon. And he said, well, Coach, I'm sure you just stepped off a curve wrong or something and, strained a muscle. And so I went to bed that night, woke up about 4 a.m, and my leg was like huge. And I had a massive blood clot, and it involved surgery. I was in intensive care, and it was kind of a mess. And when I got out, I was, I had run pretty much my whole life. Never long distance. The longest I've ever run has been 14 miles, but I usually run three miles a day. That was my go-to, and I went on blood thinner and I said, what about, do you think I can still run? And they said, yeah, I think it would be good for you. So I continued to do it, with, support, hose and now that's the end thing, I'm wearing them right now.
Yeah.
But I've been able to come back and that deep vein is shot, the valves have been destroyed, but, the leg doesn't look very good. When I go to the beach in my Speedo, it doesn't look good.
No.
but I can still run, and I still run today. It's down to 2 miles a day, though. And it's pretty slow. Last summer in the park, I was running where I usually run out here in North Canton, and I know everybody, and we're friendly. And I heard somebody coming up behind me last summer, and I turned around to just say good morning, and they were walking.
Oh, yeah.
I was running.
And that's how fast you're going?
Yeah.
You're just moving your arms more?
Yeah.
I want to pick your brain about one last thing, because, like you said, you were going to be a football coach, and then you were about to be a soccer coach until you got switched around. What would you say are the three things that you learned that had the biggest impact on the way you coached, or, just the way you run for yourself? Three things that you would say every runner should know, but not necessarily everybody does know, whether it's competitive or just to be a better runner.
Well, since I was a football guy, when I got the job, and especially when I started cross country, I made it a point to be a student of the sport.
Right.
And I started joining clinics and coming to the Ohio High School State Clinic and getting involved in USA Track and Field and the coaching education. And some powerful coaches have been very influential in my life. Dr. Vigil, the coach from Adams State, who became an Olympic coach, and Coach Larson from UCLA, who coached Neb. And incidentally, he just published a book. Actually, one of his runners published a book. It's called Running to the Edge. And it's basically about his development as a coach and how he found out through trial and error that you needed to run. You need to build the engine and aerobic capacity and running gauged in how many miles you ran. So they ran high volume. But then he found that he needed to actually run. Some of the runs had to be at a very high level, and we call it tempo now, or anaerobic threshold. And his motto was he wanted his athletes to run far fast.
Yeah.
Run far fast. And in doing that, he found that some broke down and they needed more recovery. And so, in answer to your question, I think it's important to know what you need to do to stay fit. And there's another book that just came out like yesterday. I was sent an advanced copy because it's Dina Castor, her husband, Andrew Castor.
Yeah. And
they both reside in Mammoth Lakes now, and that's who we hang out with when we go out there. And he wrote a book, and it's on how to age as a distance runner, and it's geared more to age group running and keeping people. And he started the Mammoth Track Club, and he's coaching. Dina's coaching Olympians, and he's coaching community people, giving back to the community, and coaching 50 and 60 and 70 and even 80-year-olds. And it's a pretty neat book and teaching the runner what they need to do. They need to recover, get sleep, and get proper nutrition, and to be able to run into your 80s. And many of them are still racing at that age. I don't race. I just do it just to be fit. But a byproduct of being a distance runner is it's a very healthy thing to do. Would you like the name of that book?
Yeah.
Let me see if I have it laying over here. The name of it is Keep Running.
So both of the casters are authors then, because she wrote or just came out with a book, and now he just came out with a book.
Right. Hers is awesome. If you haven't read it, you should get it. It's so uplifting. His is good for the age group runner. Hers is good for any runner, and it's let your mind run. And it talks about how she was gifted. She had some special talent, but it only came to fruition through Coach Vigil teaching her how to be generous with her time and give back to the community and think about other people. I remember the first time I ever met her, we were in Alamosa, and I took the team there for altitude training, and I met her for the first time. And as we were leaving, and we travel pretty at pretty low cost.
Yeah,
to say the money. Least. And so we were getting on the bus, and she brought out 3 dozen chocolate chip cookies for the team that she'd baked herself.
Wow!
And this is an Olympic athlete. And last year when we were in Mammoth, we had her over to our condos. We were having a cookout, and we invited them over, and she brought a whole big thing of chocolate chip cookies that she baked for the team.
Yeah.
So, but that book is Let Your Mind Run is just an awesome book as well.
One of the things that I think you've valued a lot is people like Dina, that even though she's I think, did she win the Chicago Marathon, and she got a bronze medal in the Olympics and all those other things.
Right.
Instead of, just kind of being a celebrity about it, she's very humble and very generous with her time. And I think that's one of the things that you try to instill in all your athletes. Just because you've been on a national championship team doesn't mean you get to act like a champ. You get to do things that maybe other students in the college get to do or don't get to do, but just preaching that humility and preaching that return on your investment.
Do you remember Becca Haver?
No, I don't.
I think she was. When did you graduate?
06?
06. She was there during the late 90s. She was on the national championship women's team in 99 with Evelyn Legat, Bernard Legat's sister.
Okay.
And she was not one of our top runners, but she was an awesome gal. And she went to Honduras, and it's called the MICA Project. And she works with street kids that are on sniff glue, and they try to get them back on track. And I've been, since she graduated and started that mission project, I've been supportive of it. And I just recently, a year or so ago, discovered Micah 6:8, the prophet Micah, the Old Testament book at the end of the Old Testament there. Micah 6:8 says what God, the Israelites were coming back and they were kind of messing things up, and he was a prophet, and he said, God has told me that what he wants us humans, us mortals, to be are three things: to be just, in other words, be fair; to have mercy, or have love for one another; and to be humble. And so we've tried to really take hold of that and use that as our motto. And so it's funny you mentioned that. I'm glad that was coming through even back then.
Yeah. Well, it came through because because of your attitude with running is that if you're not enjoying it, you're doing it wrong. We worked hard, but we also enjoyed ourselves and enjoyed each other's company.
Yeah, why do it if you don't enjoy it? Huh?
Right.
Well, I can tell some about you.
Yeah. the one big memory that you have to connect to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you're camping out in various places on campus.
Yeah. I think that you, in addition to having a sharp memory, I think that is one way that I've been able to stick in your mind, is that I got caught trying to spend the night in your office because I had already spent the night in the library and had already spent the night in the theater, and I was trying to get to every major building on campus. I don't know why I thought it was funny, but I thought it was the funniest thing that me and Joe and Mike all tried to do our best to. Oh, and the other place we stayed was the cafeteria. That was the most tricky because that was a big wide open space. We thought we had it made when we tried to hang out in your office for the night, because we thought nobody's going to come by. It's a small space, so nobody's going to open the door. And that ended up being the place where security caught us, and we scared the living daylights out of the cleaning lady because she thought we were there to attack her. Oh, do you remember? Yeah. Do you remember how you got informed of that? Did security give you a call, or did we tell you?
I can't remember.
Oh, it was embarrassing to say the least.
I think security did, and then I discovered it was you guys.
Yeah. I'll
tell one last story about the recent guy that I connected with, and it's literally been over the years that I've seen the guy. His name was Bobby Colson. He was from JFK High School in Cleveland. He was a black guy who, we haven't had many Afro Americans on the cross country team, and especially back then, he was kind of harassed, not really harassed, but the dean of students wasn't used to having inner city kids on Malone campus, and he suspected him of things, and he would have people looking in his window to try to catch him doing something wrong. And anyway, Bobby graduated, and he actually didn't graduate. He only went 3 years. And through the years, I've asked people, have you heard anything about Bobby Colson? And so one of my athletes from Dave Bender, about a week ago, I said, Dave, if you have any knowledge of Bobby Colson, he says, I'll get on it, Coach. So he spent a whole day and a half running down Bobby Colson. And he says, I think I've located it. He owned a plumbing company in Cleveland, Bob Colson. So I called him, and the guy answered the phone, and he goes, Coach who? And I said, Coach Hazen. He says, oh, you must be talking about my dad. And I go, yeah, is he still alive? He goes, yeah, here's his number. So I called up Bobby Colson, and we connected for the first time in over 50 years.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable. And he's now on our call, and he became a nurse and worked in the Cleveland Clinic. He's retired from the Cleveland Clinic. And during this, recently they've called him back for some work, and it was so good catching up with him. But I'll never forget our first national championship that started the whole process. It was in Findlay, Ohio, and Central State University was an awesome team. They had a guy on their team that was maybe going to be national champion by the name of Calvin Williams. And they came to the meet, and it was an out and back loop, and they cut off part of the course on the way out. And they were far better than we were. And so the meet personnel warned them, said, hey, you cut the course, but we're going to let it go but this is the way you got to do it the next time. And they came back the next time and did it the same way and cut the course. So they disqualified them. And we were second. And so we got to go to nationals.
Oh, wow.
In Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I came back to Malone, and I said to the athletic director, we qualify for nationals. He goes, what? They had no budget. They said, we can't fly you out there. And so Ken Highland, do you remember that name? He was a golf coach.
It sounds familiar, yeah.
He was the varsity club president. So they raised $1,000 to send us to Oklahoma City. So I told Bobby Colson, we're going to fly. And he goes, I'm not flying. And back then it was Eastern Airline, and they advertised their Whisper Jets. And he says, Coach, I'm not going on no Whisper Jet. and I said, well, you're on the team. You got to go. He says, no, I'm not flying. I'll take the Greyhound. I said, Bobby, it'll take you 5 days to get there in a Greyhound. The meet will be over. So I basically forced him to fly on the Whisper Jet. And I said, why don't you want to fly? He says, because they wreck. They crash. So anyway, this is our first trip ever to nationals. First time we've ever flown. Most of the guys had never flown before. And we got over Kansas, and the plane started listing to the left for quite a while. We kept seeing the same stuff on the ground.
Yeah.
And finally, the pilot came on and said, we have just discovered that our landing gear is broken. And so we're getting rid of gas. We're dumping fuel, and we're going to have to do a emergency crash landing in Lawrence, Kansas. And we have a team on board, and we're going to ask them to man the emergency doors and be there. And the stewardesses are going to come by, and we look back, and the one stewardess was crying. And we go, man, this is serious stuff. And so Colson started going, I told you guys. I told you guys.
Yeah.
And so the pilot said, after a while, he says, well, we're lowering our altitude and we're going to come in for this landing. And I want everybody to, when I say brace position, you reach down and grab your knees and whatever you do, don't look up. And so I'll never forget that when he came over the loudspeaker and said, okay, everybody in a brace position. And so we're grabbing our knees with our heads down. Most of the guys ran, some of them were sobbing. And I looked back kind of down the aisle, and there's Colson. He's sitting straight up in the seat, and he's looking out the window, and he's just kept saying, I told you guys, see? I told So that was, we ended up actually landing, and the landing gear held. And we didn't have to have a crash landing, but they had foamed the runway, and the national news was there. And
wow.
Anyway, that was Colson's claim to fame. He says, "See, I told you guys."
And he was right all along. After everybody convinced him otherwise.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So that was our first national trip.
That was in 1972.
Trip to no. That was probably 1969.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know that I ever heard that one before, that you guys had to get on the national news and crash land in Kansas.
Yeah.
I think the list of things that Coach Hazen hasn't experienced is shorter than the stuff that you have been through. Oh man. Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking an hour to talk to me, and
sure, it's been a pleasure.
I'll be keeping in touch, and maybe find some other things to pick your brain about, or some stories that I'll have to provoke you into telling. Yeah, and I really do want to get. I'm nearing the end of my career, and I truly do want to connect. So if I'm glad you mentioned that other Facebook thing with the Senecks and the Robinsons, and I'd like to get each decade maybe doing something, and maybe at some point get together. The last 2 years of Mammoth Lake trips, we've had about 10 of the alumni come out from mostly from the 70s. A couple, Jeff Gantz, but they found that to be highly. They just loved it, being in the mountains with and with the athletes, and so maybe we can even do that more locally, and not. It's pretty hard to get to Mammoth Lakes and expensive. But it really is a mountaintop experience in more ways than one, because it's a beautiful place. The training is incredible. The people are fun to hang out with, and I remember the one thing that I don't get remembered for is I won the entire team dinner on trivia night. Do you remember that? No. It was at the park. I forget the name of the park where we would usually do drills in Mammoth Lakes, but there was some other teams there, and I answered, or I got other people to answer 3 trivia questions right. Oh, yeah. And we ended up going home with like 4 giant trays of spaghetti. I remember that. And I think that was one of the ways that I got on your good side, is because you're so frugal that when you heard free dinner, it was a big thumbs up from you. Yeah. Well, I think we'll try to get the word out on getting back to Mammoth, the group. That would be awesome. But another real quick story, and I'll send you a birthday greeting from my first show from New Jersey, and he roomed with Bobby Colson, and we had to stuff people in beds and stuff. And I used to take him also south for spring track training, and I'd give him an allowance. It was like $20 for the week for food. Yeah. And I said, you got to ration it out. Well, most of the guys were on the way home. They had no money, and they were starving. And I guess I should have reminded me that I told him when he was vehemently complaining, and I said, just go into McDonald's and get ketchup packets and get a
get some hot water and make tomato soup. So I'll send you this birthday wish that he mentioned both of those instances on my birthday wish.
He reminded you of the tomato soup?
Yeah.
All right.
And rooming with Colson.
I'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Coach, thanks again, and I'll let you get back to it.
Been good catching up.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Hey, Jack Boatwright Hazen. To the man who made me sleep with my first black man and taught me how to make tomato soup using ketchup packets and water. Good stuff. Happy birthday! Yay!